Thank you for being here. Katherine Nichols,
Thank you so
teacher,
much for having
writer.
me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Teacher, writer, podcaster. How did you decide to be a teacher?
Well, I'm not sure you decide to be a teacher. I remember when I was maybe kindergarten, I would come home, line my dolls up, boss them around, be the teacher. And later on, I realized there was more to teaching than just bossing kids around, although that was fun when you're younger. But I just was drawn to it. Uh, it was interesting because I ended up teaching kids how to write, like high school kids, or helping them. I didn't teach them how to write, but I helped them find their voice and help them hone their own personal style. And the whole time I was wanting to do writing myself. I love teaching, did it for 30 years, left because I didn't want to be that teacher that the kids were saying, is she never going to leave? But and I don't miss it. I miss the kids, but I said I'm running out of time here. I need to do what was originally the thing I wanted to do the most. Right.
I mean, 30 years seems like a good run. So
It was a good run. And
when
some of
you,
that was virtual. I did I surprisingly I was kind of an early adapter to the virtual world, and I was part of a project where I taught students basically how to use technology to help enhance their learning. And I had kids in Bolivia and Peru, and it was a very cool pilot program. It kind of fizzled out, I probably because of funding, but from there, I really developed an interest in online platforms.
was teaching English, was it English literature or English like diagramming sentences or a mix of both?
It was the whole thing, but thank God we stopped diagramming sentences quite a while back. That I was good at it, but I don't know why you had to do it. But I taught all, basically, it was like 9 through 12. So you have a curriculum for the ninth grade, which is literature and writing. And I taught all the grades at different times. Toward the end of my teaching, I was training teachers in technology. And it's kind of the same thing, how to use technology to enhance what you're already doing. And then I got to work with some gifted kids, and we did all kinds of really cool online things, as well as I continued to teach the English. So I really did have a lot of fun with it and got to do different things.
Was there a creative writing classes mixed in there or was it always
There
literature?
finally was, it's kind of funny. Um, the creative writing was a part of the curriculum, but people didn't really, and by people I mean administrators, didn't really seem to see any need to push it. And I disagreed. So when I was working first with the gifted kids, I said, we need to offer this, but it's not just the gifted class. And I really liked that part about it because I said, we've got kids that want to write, I want them to be able to write something besides 5 paragraph essays and to understand there's more to it. And then we started my class. We started a magazine, both print and online. So we got submissions from the entire school. So I loved doing that. And
Nice.
luckily I had the kind of kids who could help me.
Some of my most memorable high school classes were English and creative writing, just
Oh,
to
great.
where you could see, like, I guess basic education is worth it. You got to have the foundation to understand things. But then to go that extra little step of the creative writing, of seeing like everybody that's in there doing stream of consciousness after you read As I Lay Dying, and then you do some creative writing exercises with that. And you're talking in someone else's voice in a stream of conscience. And just seeing other people in the class that didn't think they were going to be good at writing at all, and they got it immediately. And it was one of those things where you had education was fun. So it was
And
good
that's
class.
why I would say there should be a creative writing element to every single class. I got to do a really cool project. I had my creative writing group, and we also had comparative film. So they made movies and we wrote the scripts and, the whole package. But we were studying historical fiction, talking about historical fiction and being sure that you could, like they wanted to watch Gone with the Wind. I said, well, we might do that. I said, but you have to understand that's not really what I would call historical fiction. I said, honestly, all of you guys and me, we would probably be the sharecroppers. We would be coming in the back entrance to Tara, that big mansion, which
Mm.
it really made them think. So I did get to do a project, combined it with their history classes, and they got to replace one of their history assignments with a creative um, historical fiction piece. So I had kids taking the viewpoint of the boy who brought coffee and feet warmers to the Declaration of Independence writers, and they just did some really fun, clever things with it. And
Wow.
they had to research it. So my thinking is, if you can make it more fun, you're going to learn more.
Yeah, I found just in historical fiction myself where you're trying to weave it into history enough to where people would read it and go, well, hold on, did this really happen? And you're
Right.
naming people that they would know or that they wouldn't, but were around at the time, that just putting those pieces together, I didn't realize it until I got through college and then was teaching some myself about how important timelines were. And I wish I'd have realized that growing up, because it gives you the total picture so much better. Like I was teaching police ethics and introduction to law enforcement, and you lay out a timeline, just 1900s, and you go, well, this is when the Great Depression was, this is the Roaring 20s and why it was, here's the wars. I mean, really laying out national wars or conflicts is the easy place to start. And then you can start going from there of prohibition started, prohibition ended, and you get into the mind of people in history, which are, that wasn't that long ago. So you could still kind of see how they thought. And it just brought everything into the larger picture of overlapping subjects when certain things were discovered and what was going on in regular culture at the time. What a great way to look at things, especially mixing different subjects together.
Especially for visual learners too. I
Mm.
mean, and even if you're not specifically a visual learner, that kind of visual aid could really help you add a dimension to your understanding. And I spent well. Here's what happens when you're a young teacher. Your experience was probably different, the type of teaching you were doing, but when you're a young teacher, you come in and you do it the way they want you to do it because you want to keep your job and you think they know better. If you're a teacher, you like your teachers. So you have this kind of innate uh,
Mm.
respect for teachers. Unfortunately, that means that you don't try new things. And I would say the last 10 years of my teaching, I was confident enough and had the opportunity to say, I'm not going to keep doing it the same way. And I know I can get the same or better results by trying some different things. And I wish I could help young teachers understand that, but it's not much different. I worked with some student teachers and they pretty much have to do what their supervising teacher said. And if they get a job, and then now with the restrictions that are added to teachers, I just feel for them.
Yeah, the big thing for me with teaching was lesson planning and
Oh yeah.
how you stick to what they want you to teach, but then put your own spin on it too, to make it like my view of teaching and why I got involved with whether it was first aid and first responder stuff, and then teaching police things in an academy versus a college. That it was, I liked the class and the information was good, but it was just not delivered at the
And
way that I would like it to be delivered the best to maintain some interest in it. So it was, how can I make this interesting for me, not only teaching it, but for someone learning it. So I think that's what drove me for teaching. But when I started, I was a trooper in Virginia, and I taught some academy classes and then field training and things like that. So you're modeling it after how you learned it, and
Right.
then how you think you would like to learn it, and then teaching for University of Phoenix. It wasn't online. It was a brick and mortar place in Virginia Beach, and it was teaching law enforcement classes. So that was good because I liked learning about that even more. And it's, to me, the University of Phoenix is, in my experience, primarily concerned with getting money from people to go to
Yeah.
college and not
Sadly.
necessarily educating. But
And
they
when
have
you
a
talk,
great adult learning class, like teaching the teacher how to teach adults. I'm really
right.
glad I went to that class with them, and that was pretty great. So,
Well, and you get when you have that flat lesson plan, it doesn't take into account your learners' needs, their learning styles, and how you're going to motivate them. And you need the freedom to be able to do that. Unfortunately, like you said, I'm glad you had that training because that kind of gives you the freedom or the permission to know that it's okay to kind of be yourself. And that that's to me, that's the key to the success. Kids used to come in my class and they'd say, "Well, what are we going to do today?" I said, "Oh, we are going to have so much fun." And they would say, "Okay, is this your fun or our fun?" And I said, "It's everybody's fun." Of course, they knew they weren't going to have that much fun, but I did have fun doing it, and I think that's key. And if you're in lockstep with everybody else, it's hard to have that much fun.
yeah, I like, since the policing background, I liked reading rules, like uh, the understanding of what you can and can't do. That's good.
Yeah.
And then for me, for my experience in teaching, was just, if they followed their own rules, it would have been great. But they didn't, because
Yeah.
they were more concerned about enrollment than teaching
Yeah.
something. Like, one of the best reviews I got from a student was, this was the first class that I was responsible for what I had to, I knew what I had to learn, and I was graded to where if I didn't do it right, that it was going to be wrong. So, I mean, that's where me and the college separated our
Right.
views on
Yeah, because
things.
they don't want you to uh, give kids the opportunity to fail and learn
Mm.
from failing. They don't want that, and that's unfortunate. I mean, I would always I don't like kids to fail, so I quite frequently would allow do-overs and makeups because I want them to learn. But sometimes now, especially in Georgia, which we have a great thing, we have the Hope Scholarship, and if you graduate high school with a B average, then you get partial or all of your in-state college paid for. Well, what that did was it just put all this pressure on the kids, to make B's, and then it put the pressure on the teachers to give B's.
Mm.
And I mean, it's a wonderful program, but I never really understood exactly how to get around that, except by
Mm.
offering opportunities to redo things. And some kids don't want to do that; they just want the grade, and that makes it, of course, less pleasant.
Yeah. And then I think that having bad teachers
Yeah.
makes you more likely to want to become a teacher if you like a subject, because you're like, that they really did terrible work with this, and it could be a great thing to learn. Like, a lot of my MBA stuff was, it was, you learned what you wanted to learn on your own. The class
Yes.
or the teacher wasn't going to teach it to you. So, some really good teachers in that, and then just some really terrible teachers. But I mean, that's life, I guess.
It is, and it is unfortunate. Um, I think if you get teachers that teach you how to learn yourself, then later on, when you get one of those not so great teachers, you're like, I really need you. You tell me what I need to do, and I'll figure out how to learn from this experience. So, a good teacher, I feel like, can set the foundation to get you through just about any kind of horrific academic situations, which I've known teachers who were not good teachers, and it was
Yeah.
sad.
It'd be nice if you had more outstanding teachers than not, but
Mhm.
I do like the mix of it. I think having a bad teacher, or maybe not a bad teacher, just a disinterested teacher,
Yes,
is
yes.
good because then you can learn all these other things and you can set it against the good teachings and mm, it's
And
variety. It's nice.
I felt like, now I was pretty lucky with my college experiences, but I felt like kids were more likely to encounter in college teachers who were not interested in teaching. They were writing academically, they had other aspirations than teaching. So it was hard as a high school. When I taught seniors, I had to prepare them. I said, you know, we care, for the most part, we care about how you do. If you're in one of those giant lecture halls, you can't expect the teacher to really be enthralled with the subject even. So, there are a lot of disappointing experiences, but I feel like you teach a kid how to tap into their creativity and they can get through it. And I believe everybody has sparks of creativity within them. I have so many people say, I don't know how you write a book. I don't have any creativity at all in me. And I'm thinking, just because I wrote a book that's not, I don't have the corner on creativity. I said, do you have a garden? Because you don't want to look at what I call a garden. And, I'm thinking, to me, that is the ultimate in creativity, understanding that. And how do you deal with people? Are you really good with people? That takes a creative aspect that we don't call creative. So I felt like in the gifted classes and the creative writing, I got the opportunity to look at people and say, don't say you're not creative. You have it. Maybe people told you not to use it, because if you're teaching elementary school and you've got second graders and they're all loaded with creativity, you do have to kind of tamp it down a little. So if you get teachers who don't appreciate that, you may have hidden your light and not even known it. But that was so much fun to me, is having kids realize you're creative, you just haven't exactly figured out what you're creative in, and if you want to pursue it. So it there were just really cool things about teaching.
Yeah, the creativity seems like it's meant to be crushed out of you to a point to get you to stand in line and maybe be a good factory worker. But
Well, and I had teachers, even teachers who were like, now we don't want to do all that frou-frou stuff. And I'm like,
mm,
you ask my students what they do. I don't even know what you're talking about with frou-frou stuff, unless you're talking about you don't want to do interesting stuff, because that's what we are doing. But I taught for a long time, and I was to a point where nobody really intimidated me. But if you're a new teacher, it it's hard. I feel for them. And
yeah,
and
I, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I'm sorry.
I wish they kept, or maybe they'll bring it back sometime, the arts more in high school, especially trades, where auto mechanics is what got me through high school, and then the creative writing and that was that and
Well,
soccer. Those are the
and
things that got me through.
and I think a course like auto mechanics for survival would be a great elective. I mean, I may not ever have to change a tire, but I should understand the basics of it, and just some general practical things. We did have a course called Practical English, and we taught the kids a lot of things like, about income tax, and just if it fell into a writing area, and but wasn't covered by another subject, we kind of threw it in there. Unfortunately, it got the uh, moniker practically English, and the kids in there, I
Mm,
think, were kind of looked down on. And we practiced. We taught them how to do resumes. We did interviews with them, and I had several kids who were going for an interview at McDonald's, and we did a resume. And they said, "I don't need a resume for McDonald's." I said, you don't need that necessarily, but what if you're the only person interviewing for that job who says, "Here's my resume"? I think you're going to get it, because wow. And we did have kids. That was very that was a cool class, which could be incorporated into the curriculum. But it's hard. It's hard. Education is just a very tricky field. Always has been.
I remember starting in middle school, we were allowed to take electives that lasted half of the year, and
Yeah.
home ec was one of them, which was good because it not only did I make napkin rings, but I also, you learn a little bit of personal finance and just how to write a check, balance a checkbook back then.
Oh
And
yeah.
in the Marines, they had these classes that were just fundamental classes like math for Marines, which sounds fun, but it's
Yeah. Hmm.
it's just basically how to use, how to balance a checkbook, how to create a budget, how to pay your bills, and basic things like that, about taxes as well.
Mhm.
And those basic classes were great, even if they were just a good refresher, because you're probably going to pick something up that you're like, oh, this is an easier way than the way I was doing it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, I'm a VP of the Atlanta Writers Club, which I have to do a brief shout out to because um, our program just offers so many educational opportunities, and we have 2 conferences a year. But a lot of times there'll be programs that I kind of already know how to do. I mean, I'm my seventh book comes out in November. Doesn't mean I know everything, or even I'd say a tenth of what I need to learn about writing. But if it's a workshop on basics, I'm like, well, do I need it? Well, if I sit through it, I almost always pick up something that I never thought of that way. And so, that's the way the Marines, it's like you might think you know everything, but you can also learn how to look at it a different way, which, like you said, could save you time and trouble. And as a writer, it can really help you spark things you didn't think about in that way.
So with creativity for you then, teaching for 30 years, certainly you wrote during that time.
Yeah, I did, but it was more like I love fiction. I was basically teaching kids how to write nonfiction, essay types and critical pieces. But I decided that the important thing for them to understand is that should be creative as well. Because if you're writing a college entrance exam, I mean, essay, and you need to get your voice in it because that's the one. It's kind of like handing the resume. You want to stand out, and you need to stand out in a genuine and authentic way, and in a creative way if you possibly can. So I didn't do, and all this was in school. I did not, when I first got out of college, I had majored in English and not teaching. And I was such a nerd that I discovered, or my counselor pointed out, that if I took one more history course, I would have a double major. And in two of probably the least job prepared sounding majors, English and history. Now I found out that English was actually a very good major to have. People were like, oh, good, we want somebody who can catch mistakes and things like that. Not the most exciting jobs. But I was determined not to go straight into a traditional job. So I wrote commercials and public service announcements for a television station in Chattanooga. And that was really fun. And I won't say I had a sheltered life before that, but there were just a lot of things that I had not been exposed to. And it was eye opening and material for many of my novels in the future that I didn't realize it was going to be. But when I moved to Atlanta, it was harder to get into TV. So I was writing copy for radio. And that was really fun. And at that time, I decided, but you just don't make any money. If you're not in sales in those fields, you're not going to make a lot of money on the local level. So that's when I started school. So once again, I wasn't doing creative writing, I was writing papers. And then later, I got what in Georgia we call the specialist, education specialist. They don't always have it, but it's a stepping stone between your doctorate and your master's. But for me, I'll just be honest, I was just doing it to get more money because I was very tired of sitting in those classes. But the last major I got, I did get to learn about some technology and how to, jazz up learning with all sorts of cool things. And that was very valuable to me now, especially because today I had all my lights set up and I thought, well, I need to do something else. And I was on TikTok, the book talk part of it. I don't know if you know about that, but TikTok, I really don't like getting lost in it. But if you can just get the book talk tag, you can learn all these cool things about what people are reading, and especially young people. And boy, fantasy is just out of control. But so I thought, well, I'll just do some videos for that. Now, if I hadn't been forced to kind of get on board with some very basic technology that at the time everybody thought was really hard, I don't know that I would have the not the lack of fear. It's like there was a study I read about one time. It's like comparing boys to girls, and what's that fancy hardware store, Brookstone? I think they still have them, real fancy hardware. And they put a box in the middle of the store with a big red button on it. And they watched to see nothing else, just that. They watched to see who pushed the button. Well, I would have pushed that button in a heartbeat. Tends to be more men push the button than women, but it's like not being afraid to push that big button and see where it might take you. So I thought that I did some comparative educational things with boys versus girls, and really tried to empower both sides to get the other viewpoint. And that was a lot of fun too. And in my novels, I usually, well, not always, but frequently I will have a young person who plays an important part in it. And without my teaching experience, I wouldn't have a clue. I probably don't really have a total clue now either, but I can fake it. So,
Yeah. How much did you see students change over that time?
people ask me that, and I don't really think the students change so much. I think it's their environment, and they might have to adjust to their environment. But basically, if you, I feel like we didn't do this enough because I started teaching. It was the early '80s, and we didn't really we weren't respectful with kids. I was pretty young myself,
Sure.
and as I got older, I realized how much easier it would be to establish a mutual sense of respect. Startled a lot of the kids. They were like, it was a trick. But by the time I got more comfortable with that, I realized that's really the basis of what you're doing: respect, mutual respect. And the kids aren't much different on that. I have a almost 17-year-old grandson, and I can talk to him pretty clearly about just about anything. And he'll tell me stuff that's going on at his school and this, that, and the other. And it's the same kind of stuff, that was going on before. Probably a lot more information about subjects that we should educate the kids on so they don't get misinformation. But he's real open with me about it. And then I have a 15-year-old granddaughter and two 13-year-old granddaughters. So I don't think, I don't think the kids have changed as much as we think they have. Back then, I don't know if you remember, but it was like, if you let your kids watch television, you'd rot their brain. Well, I was a single mother for a while, and I was like, there has to be a time that kid has to watch television because I'm not going to survive. So, and it didn't rot his brain. It didn't rot these kids' brains. Now,
Just softened it a little.
yeah, it changed the way they process information. And so you have to, if you make them aware of that, I think they can make adjustments. I guess I'm pretty hopeful about kids aren't changing in a bad way.
Yeah. It's from traveling around the US in 2012. We were in an RV for a year or so, and
Wow.
we went to different regions. Great way to see the country. We went to different regions, and you could really, Southern hospitality is a real thing. The West is different. I got a new insight on hippies that I didn't have
Yeah.
before, which is that just hippies care about themselves and no one else. And then the Northeast was my least favorite place just because the
Oh,
people
yes.
seemed the most unfriendly. But I think that's because if you're inside most of the year because it's cold, then you're not talking to people. And in the South, you're outside a lot more. So you have to learn how to deal with people more. So it's, I mean, the
And we're
country's
not
great. I
all
wouldn't change it, but
I think in the Northeast, a lot of times people are always in a hurry, um, or they seem to be always in a hurry. That is, of course, I think more the city areas. I think as you get out into a suburban thing, that I think we're more alike than we're different, but the vibe
mm,
can be really different. And are you originally from the South?
Virginia. Yep.
Okay, that's sort of South. It's
Yeah.
it's
Sort of.
it's not it's happy South. Um, but I had friends who moved here from northern areas, and they were puzzled because everybody's very friendly, but you don't. It takes a long time to become good friends with people because we're a little insular too. And I say that because in a couple of my books, I have people who are dealing with that, and they're like, "Everybody seems so friendly, but nobody ever invites me to do any." And I'm like, "Well, being warm and polite is not the same thing as really wanting to embrace you and pull you in." Um, which I think is probably true in almost everywhere. It's just expressed differently. But yeah, I would like to travel. I love traveling. I want to travel more. I was
Yeah.
super,
Maybe the way to call it is the South starts off sweeter. I mean, you could put it
yes,
like Pepsi versus Coke. Like Coke has
yes,
it's it's not as sweet to start, but Pepsi is sweeter. So that's why kids usually like it better.
yes. That's a good way.
Also made in the South, Pepsi. So
Right.
for I think what was that?
Yeah.
Is it Carolina? I'm pretty sure New Bern or something.
Are you talking Coke or Pepsi? Coke.
Pepsi.
Uh, I don't know about Pepsi. I know Coke. A lot of my friends who lived in northern Florida, their parents had a lot of Coke shares, so something was
Mm,
going on in that area with
I'll
Coke.
have to check that out.
Yeah, I'm
Different
not
type of
positive.
Coke, maybe.
I'm
Too.
from Chattanooga, and there are quite a few unusual things that came from there, and I've forgotten what it. Oh, did you ever remember that painkiller BC powder?
hmm The
Okay,
power is in the powder.
yes, was a big company in Chattanooga called Chatham Drugs, and they may still be around. But all of these things that you wouldn't think would come from a place like Chattanooga, they were from the Chatham drug thing, and it was just interesting to find out that nobody knew that, nobody cared that my hometown was the home of Chatham Drugs. So that regionalism versus wanting to venture out, I find that so interesting too, and I think it's important at teaching, very important.
Maybe that's the difference between kids now and years ago is just they have more information available. I don't know
Exactly.
if they'll soak it up, but it's just there
Well, and
if they want
and
to look at it.
and one thing I found out really quickly with my students was they knew how to do the technology that they wanted to do, but as far as evaluating a website or even searching the internet for exactly or as close as possible to exactly what they wanted, they didn't know how to do it. I mean, they really would give up after a couple of tries, not finding what they wanted. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's not still an issue. That's when you teach divergent thinking. You're like, if this one doesn't work, try this one. Don't say you can't do it. Keep doing it because it's there. And I think I feel like we think kids are so tech savvy and so information savvy, and they're still just floundering a lot of times. And
Hmm.
and like you said, there's so much more of it now.
It's a good point. And then you throw AIs in on top of all that,
Oh gosh,
which
yeah,
I view them as just other people. Like each AI, you just say, this is a person. It's going to have its own. even if you're not saying it's self-aware, it's going to have its own personality, just like a human develops their personality off their experience and proclivities. And
That
I
it's
mean, it's not
funny.
going to be the end all truth of everything. It's just their slant.
And what I want to do, I've been trying to figure out how to do it. I want to write a book about people trying to teach AI's empathy. And I have a whole big cool thing going on with that involving like guards in a women's prison. And so I have some really cool ideas on it, but it's moving so fast that I'm afraid by the time I get going with it, either everything will have already been done or I'll be so out of it, it'll just be quaint. And I don't want that. But I'm fascinated with that concept because you can feed in information and and kind of I guess the people who feed it in, do you think the AI personality kind of comes from them a little bit? I
Just
mean,
like a person, like a kid raised by crazy parents
okay,
might be
okay.
crazy. Of course, they might not be crazy too. That's the gamble
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
So you
Nurture
don't know if the
nature.
AI
Yeah,
is a
I don't
psychopath or a sociopath. Like it's
yeah.
in my understanding of psychopath and sociopath, which I think the definitions have changed since I looked them up in a dictionary in the library in Essex High School in the 80s, which was a psychopath can fake empathy, but they don't understand it. So they can fit in, but you don't know that they're not fitting in. So that's how they can do the unconscionable things that psychopaths would do. And then a sociopath can't fake empathy and they can't fit in and they don't understand it. And that's the difference. And I think they've changed it around since
Yeah.
then, or
They're
either I
much
just learned it the wrong way.
closer. They're much
Mm.
closer to each other, and the major difference is, um, that the sociopath, they can fake stuff, but basically the only person they care about is themselves, or that they are always the center of their universe. With a psychopath, if there's something they want to get and they have to venture away from that totally egocentric thing, they can do it, but
Mm.
that makes them dangerous. Usually, sociopaths are just like really boring people at parties and don't usually hurt people.
The it seems to me then that AIs are just psychopaths. It's just like dealing with
Yeah.
psychopaths. And I've talked with a few psychopaths that I knew were psychopaths that were diagnosed it and you knew it just through law enforcement. And it is different than a regular person. And then
Yeah.
you can pick that up on people in regular society when you see them and you go, okay, now when I go through this checklist of what makes a person a psychopath, how many do I need before I go, this person is a psychopath? I need to be aware of it versus a sociopath, which is just, again, the boring at parties people. But I
Yeah.
mean, you
Yeah.
can still, you look at them and go, that person's not quite right or not, maybe not. Yeah. They're different than the average. So let's
Right.
put it.
And they will make choices that are so incredibly selfish and so incredibly off that you'll think they must be like says psychopaths. I hope my
Yeah.
dog's not making too much noise.
No, you're good. You're good.
He's outside, but so yeah, I don't really do any. Well, one of my some of my characters have sociopathic and psychopathic tendencies, but I don't bother to do what we're doing. It's kind of like as because most of the time, if you're around like a psychopath, you don't know it, and they're not like always going around chopping people up in the basement. So, it's
Mm.
just like you said, something's off. And if you have a sense of self-preservation, you don't really want to hang out with them. So that's kind of the way I present the sociopathy and whatever in my books. It's like we know he just ain't right, but but we don't care what he is. We just want to get away. So
It's the cautionary tale. I
yes,
mean, when you
exactly,
talk to somebody like that you've determined that's what they are, you need to never forget it. So
exactly.
there are things you don't talk to them about. Yeah.
And I worked so hard, and this is, I do have a feminist bent to a lot of my writing and my thinking because I observed high school girls, and one in particular, so smart, really, really smart in math and science. And she said she had this math teacher who not a great teacher, and she said, I will that he will ask a question, and I will raise my hand and I have the answer, and then a boy will shout out the answer, and he will call on the boy and praise him. And I said, well, that's simple. I said, you just have to shout louder, sit up front and shout out the answer, because if that seems to be the rule for that classroom. I mean, it's not like you're even breaking the rule. It's what you have to do. And she did it. She came back and said, wow. And she ended up working, I think she still is, with the National Health Department someplace in DC, who knows now. But she and her husband both super smart like that. And I said, you don't need to ever be in a shadow when you know the answer. Speak up. So I worked on that, and that's like with my books, my protagonists are women, and usually they're women who have to learn that different ways. They're insecure.
Do you see a difference in the way that feminism is presented from the 80s to now?
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like I think it's getting a little better, because what I think happened is I think feminism started out, and men were sorry, but a lot of men were afraid, and they did whatever they could to embarrass or say, oh, you're not feminine if you do that. How are you ever going to find a husband? What's wrong? And then I think that gradually women just said, well, that's a bunch of crap, and eventually just said, we aren't going to fall for that. And then I think there was a resurgence of that. And because I was teaching a computer class, and it's been probably 20, 15 years or longer, because I've been out of education for a while. And it was cool because one of the girls in the class ended up living really close to me now. And when she found out that she lived close to me, we had communicated on Facebook and we got together. But one of the things she said on Facebook was, she said, I want to apologize to you, because I remember being such a little snit about the way I interacted with the boys. And like, this girl she could do anything technologically, whatever, but she wouldn't step forward and do it. And she said, I realize now what you were saying. And now she does. She's done all these cool things too. And that's what's so rewarding about teaching, because you never know if you sowed a seed and it just got washed away, or if it took and you maybe never get to see it. But you don't have to see it to imagine that it's happening. And so I think a lot of things that happened, a lot of women were like, no, I'm not a feminist. And the same thing was kind of going around. Well, I kind of noticed with my granddaughters, I don't hear them use the term feminist, but they sure as heck are feminists. They're like, why would I take a back seat to that? Why wouldn't I speak up? Which isn't to say that they don't have their own, I want this boy to like me, so maybe I shouldn't let him know how smart I am. That's a cautionary tale too. But hopefully, I I want to feel like it leveling off. Although I did read just yesterday that the number of female CEOs has gone into drastic decline. And what we thought was kind of a new outlook on that sort of thing in business, there's a big conservative movement to push it back. So I feel like it's more how women react to the movement to suppress feminism. I think that defines what it looks like.
Yeah, it's definitely the pendulum swinging, it seems to me.
Mhm.
And I'm a kid of the 70s, 80s. And back then, it seemed like feminism was trying to establish that men and women had some sort of equality,
Right,
like that you had the same opportunities available if you could perform whatever task it was. Like, you, not everybody could be this certain job, but everybody should be able to have a chance to do the
right.
certain job. And then maybe towards 2010s, 2015s, maybe it started to seem like it was more of, to use the supremacy word, that feminism was about female supremacy. And I
Exactly.
think that's the pushback, and that's just the pendulum swinging and how it works. And
And and don't you think it's based on fear a lot too? You know, like women are afraid sometimes to be themselves, to be seen that way, and men are afraid kind of women that are like that, but maybe more about um, what their place in a world like that would look like. And they don't
mm,
realize that that doesn't mean women aren't going to love them and want the equality that it started out to be. But I really think fear is the thing that people just respond to without knowing that's what they're doing.
I think there's something about the nature of men and women. So that's your
Oh, yeah.
underlying thing that you always have to keep in account. Like, the nature of man is he wants to protect and overcome obstacles. And maybe the nature of women is to nurture and develop
Right.
more. I mean,
Right.
everybody has that stuff in different concentrations, but I think that just feels like it more. And there's always going to be somebody that's different in whatever group. So that's okay too. You're always going to have the outliers, but talking on a bell curve. So it's, for me, I think about it as confidence versus self esteem. Like,
Yeah, that's a good way
it,
to put it.
if
Um,
you're a kid, you want to be confident. You want to, especially if you're a parent raising a kid, you're raising a person to be a good adult, that you want them to be confident, but you don't want them to be overconfident, and you don't want them to be confident when they shouldn't be. So that it needs to drive their curiosity to learn things, so then they can build that confidence. But then the self-esteem, you don't want a super high self-esteem, because then what are you going to do with that person? So I feel like growing up was tamping down the self-esteem enough that doesn't make you feel worthless, but makes you feel like I can accomplish that thing if I apply myself to it. So I'm going to become like riding a bike. I'm going to learn how to ride a bike. I just can't go out and jump on a bike and start riding. So that would be overconfident. And if somebody was like, you can do whatever you want to do, you just go out there and do it. And maybe that's true, but it's not going to happen that quick. You don't jump on
well,
the bike and go. You have to learn.
it needs a caveat. It needs a thing of it depend. You have to decide how much you want it, what you're willing to
Mm.
give up for it. You can't just have everything you want without making some sacrifices or whatever. And that may be a major difference with kids now. Some of the students that I had early on, they didn't have necessarily high aspirations for themselves. I mean, they were content going into more traditional ways and didn't think, "Oh, I'm the best on the team. I'm going to get a scholarship." And I feel like kids today, in trying to boost their self esteem, we've given a false sense of themselves. You know, it's like I believe that within boundaries and reason, you and how much you want it, you could pretty much do whatever you want to do, unless you don't have the talent. But I think a lot of kids think they're entitled to get
Mhm.
what they want without making the sacrifices. But you know, I say that, and then I'm thinking, did we not hear the same thing adults saying about us when we were younger? So maybe it's just outlook. And
Yeah, I think it's just the natural flow of civilization. The classic, weak people make for hard times, hard people make for easy times, and then you just go back and forth because it's always
and
it's the
and
ocean.
and what we need to do is redefine weak. You know, we need to
Mm,
recognize that empathy isn't weakness. We need to
mm.
recognize those kinds of things. This is there's a woman. I don't think she's still writing, but her name is Mary Pfeiffer, and she wrote a book called uh, Drowning Ophelia. As
Oh,
in
little Hamlet
Hamlet.
reference.
It's a great
Mhm.
book. What I did that was really cool. When I went into, I was like a person who went into the gifted classes and did projects. So there was a book about boys. I can't remember what it was. I think that might have just been the name, Boys. And then there was a book, the Reviving Ophelia. That's what it was, Reviving Ophelia. And so I had the boys read Reviving Ophelia, and the girls read the one based about boys. And I had some. These were some ninth grade boys, smart, but like athletic, cool. Cool as defined by themselves and their environment. And one of them just broke my heart. He said, I was reading that, and all I could think about is that what my sister goes through. And I
Mm.
thought, my job is done here. If you can get one person to look at it from the different viewpoint. But one of the cool things in that book is her observation about how boys and girls play games. So most of the time, when a group of boys playing, if they have a dispute, most of the time they will refer to the rules. Girls don't necessarily do that. Girls will change the rules if someone
Mm.
is really upset about them, or if they decide, that rule doesn't really need to apply to me. So they will adjust the rules, and the boys want, no, we need the rules for order. And to
Mm.
me, that was like this huge light going off, like, that's different between men and women. We don't care about the rules. I mean, yes, if they're fitting our needs and they keep things moving smoothly, sure. But I'll break if I think a rule is wrong and I'm not going to get arrested on the spot, I'll break it, And my husband, it's not that he's a total rule follower, but that shocks him sometimes that I say, well, that's a stupid rule. And I think that's kind of I don't know. I just thought that was so interesting. And her studies with boys and girls are really cool.
Yeah, I'll have to check those out. I think that's what it comes down to there is the rules. Like, and as you said, I don't think men are all about the rules all the
No.
time, but I think that's falling back to this as I don't know if you've seen the TV show The Wire, character in
Hmm.
there called
Hmm.
Omar, not
Right.
exactly an Ophelia reference, but
Right.
Omar says a man has got to have a code. And I think that's true. The thing with society is people need to agree on that code. So if you have a society that's made based on these certain rules or moral codes, and then you have half of society that says, I'm not going to abide by those, then you're going to have a problem if you
And
want to follow those rules. And I think that's the big draw or the big upheaval of at least society in America right now is you have the patriarchy, matriarchy arguments, and we
and
just need a set of
socio
rules we agree on.
right. Have you ever and I've been trying to remember the name, it finally came to me, Maslov. He was a psychologist,
The
puts
hierarchy of needs.
yes.
Mm.
And because of the way people develop, there's probably going to be a greater percentage of people who hang in there and they're content and feel safe following the rules of society. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to do something immoral, but then at what he considered the top of the hierarchy was somebody like Gandhi or Christ, who says the rules are here, but I'm talking about right and wrong. And I'm talking about my sense of right and wrong. And so if you had a whole population of people who are like my sense of right and wrong, you'd have to do a really good job of setting up a society that could handle that. It's like you're saying, if everybody didn't follow the rules, but if everybody respected the rules and the women would say, let's change the rules to make them fair, and the men might be more likely to say, but won't there be chaos? And there are plenty of women that feel the same way.
Right.
It's not black and white as
Generalities.
I'm making it.
Mm.
But for me, I'm like, is that real? Do we really need that rule? And is it doing more harm than good? That's my question. Does the rule do more harm than good? And if it's not harming people, then we should follow them. And if it's
I mean,
harming people, we should take a look at it.
less rules. I agree. Less rules.
Yes, yes.
It's an interesting parallel, whether one reads the Bible or not. The Adam and Eve thing is
Yeah, yeah.
don't eat out of that tree. Okay, I'm not going to eat from that tree. And then Eve's like, I don't really like that rule. I think we could eat from that tree. And then Adam's like, well, I don't think we should. And then, it's,
And they
I mean,
do. And
they were wrestling with that back then.
And what's funny about that is if you look at that from the masculine point of view, it's like, oh man, she's responsible for all the horrible things. But if you look at it from a different perspective, I'm thinking, just imagine how dead dog boring it would have been to just hang out in that garden all the time doing what? Nothing. Because you don't know the difference between good and bad. So aren't you just bored out of your mind? So obviously that doesn't really go along with the biblical teaching, but it's interesting to think about.
It's a human way to think about it. I agree. You have to have the difference to be able to tell the difference. And I think that, especially growing up Southern Baptist and going to church and learning all that, and it wasn't crazy Southern Baptist like snake handling and things.
Good.
Not that that's crazy, but that's just a little more risky, maybe. That it was, you presented with it as Eve is the one that caused the problem, but I think it's Adam that caused the problem because he didn't follow the rule. We knew it was the rule. So I think you have that idea left over in male and female, speaking in generalities, that still happens today. So can we make a society that agrees on some rule and then stick with it, or is part of society always going to be wanting to change the rules? And I think they're always going to be wanting to change the rules.
Well,
Men and women.
we are evolutionary beings, and the rules need to change with what benefits society and what's right. And so that wouldn't be a total upheaval, but I'll give you a total upheaval here. You're thinking, well, it was Eve, it was Adam. Actually, I blame God. You put
Oh,
a tree in the middle and say,
mm,
don't eat that fruit. What child do you know that is not going to go, well, why not? And it's the human conundrum, I guess, using a big word that I'm not sure is appropriate, but I think it is.
it's the nature of humanity. There's a video game called SimCity,
Yes.
and you can get a cheat code for it back when it was on Nintendo, and you would get unlimited money or nearly unlimited money. And you could build the city however you wanted, a paradise, police stations, fire departments, traffic wouldn't be a problem. And you just build this city and things are going well. But then there's also a thing where you could select natural disaster or an attack by Godzilla or something.
Yeah.
I think it was Godzilla. And then you think, why would anybody ever do that? And I wonder, I don't know the mind of God, but I wonder if that's the case is, well, I'm going to make this perfect place and these people in here to do whatever it is I want people to do. But I'm going to also have this selection for chaos.
Well,
And
and if you don't have
no,
adversity, you don't get the chance to grow. I don't think we necessarily need to have typhoons, but the conflict between the rule followers and the rule adjusters, if you want to call it that. If we don't have that, don't we just get complacent and kind of smug you know, and I hate boredom. I think boredom is my enemy. So I always look at things like that.
I don't know if there's ever been a time in human existence where the agreed to rules have all been followed. because there's
Oh,
always somebody outside of them, and there's always somebody that wants to change them. And I think that was the big thing for me in law enforcement,
right.
was seeing the rules and going, okay, what are the rules and how do I need to enforce them? Spirit of the law, letter of the law, what can I do? What are my limits? And then understanding that there are people that make the rules and people that are subject to the rules that don't care about them at all.
Yeah.
And they're on a different level of thinking. And I think the more money you have, probably the more power you have, the more power you have, the more money you have. And it's a complete different way of thinking than the regular person. The
I
regular,
think so.
as in the regular person that's working paycheck to paycheck or whatever, or if they've worked long enough to where they have a few months of, you know, money saved up to where if something happened, they could last a few months, but otherwise they couldn't. That's why when the lockdowns happen and they're like 14 days to stop the spread, my first thought was I couldn't live not working for 14 days. I I would lose everything I have and be behind on all my bills for a very long time trying to catch up. So I was like, there's something else to this, that if you actually had a disease that was killing everyone, if you had a pandemic, you wouldn't have to tell people to stay home. If people are
Right.
dying in the streets, people are
Yeah.
going to act differently. So as long as you have the panhandler on the corner or at the stoplight, the canary in the coal mine, if you will, if they're
Yeah.
still out there, it's not that big a deal. So,
You,
mm,
yeah. You don't have to totally panic. Just be smart. But it's
rules.
hard. You can't teach people to be smart. That was the one thing. I never felt like I had a stupid student. And I knew I had some that had lower IQs and higher IQs, but I never considered any one of them stupid. I thought, they're going to learn a different way. They're going to learn a different pace. They're going to learn what they need to learn. But adults, I know a lot of stupid adults who just choose to be. They just choose to be stupid. And that, as a former teacher and a citizen of the world, is very annoying because it's like, you don't have to be a genius to use your brain.
It's it's shocking sometimes because you think these are the people that taught me how to think, and
Oh,
now they're not. I don't
no.
understand why we're not thinking the same, and I understand we're at different points in our lives, but what's going on? And then usually I just say, "Is it me? Am I the one that has that's not seeing it right?" And I think with law enforcement, one of the things I try to do the most, and I think you can go overboard with it, is empathy, is trying to see it from another person's perspective.
Yeah,
Because if you look at it from someone else's perspective and your job is order maintenance through traffic control, writing tickets,
right.
that if you look at everybody else's perspective, you're never going to write a ticket. And if there is no traffic control and order maintenance through that, what happens to society as we know it? But I know there's plenty of people that don't follow any of those rules. And there's plenty of people that don't follow them and get away with it. And people that, if they got caught, they would still get away with it. So it's a strange
Yeah,
thing that living in that middle section of the bell curve of society, because it certainly seems that way.
yeah, and I don't know, when you just stop and think about things, it seems fairly logical to me. Some improvements that could be made, and I get why some people don't want them. But yeah, I think that's so interesting as the law enforcement person. Yeah, I think that would be very hard for me. If I knew somebody did something that was going to be harmful to other people, I wouldn't have a bit of problem, following that rule because you can't hurt other people. And even with traffic rules, you know, I live in an area where a red light is merely a suggestion. And I am so mad all the time because they could kill me and or other people. So I wouldn't have a bit of trouble with. There's some things that just seem so clear, but like you said, there are so many people that just think they don't have to follow the rules, and it's not because they question the rules; it's because they think they're special, and that's tough.
It's those simple things in the structure of society that are like the traffic light, that
Hmm.
it's just a light. And when you think about it, you're putting a whole lot of trust in somebody you don't know. in that if you did know, you might not like that they're going to follow those rules because you're going to follow those rules with the idea that that is the greater good for the greater good of everyone is if
Yes.
we follow these traffic rules so everybody can get to where they want to in an orderly fashion. But I think you can use that as a explanation of a bunch of other things in society where people are like, well, that's merely a traffic light to me. I'm going to do what I
Yeah.
want.
Yeah. She can stop, but I don't need to.
Mm.
I'm like, that's totally a puzzle to me. I mean, I like being alive. Is That's a good rule to follow. It
And
makes
that, well, there
sense.
are times where I think you do disregard a traffic light.
Well,
And I mean, you got to think about it and you hope that other people are thinking those same things. Like if it's 2 in the morning, there's no traffic coming, you can
right.
see there's no traffic coming, and you're trying to get somebody to the hospital. Should you stop at that traffic light? I don't think so. I would, I
That
wouldn't
is
want that.
That's funny. I was lucky enough to get to take kids on Europe trips. We went 5 times with kids, and then I got to go. Um, we earned trips because of taking the big groups. But we were in Germany, and we had just come from Italy. Well, if you lie, you're a sucker if you wait your turn in Italy. You're never going to get your food at the counter or your ice cream or whatever. I mean, I just never seen anything like it. There's no take a number. There's no, I was here first. There's me. And it works for them. I mean, they're not angry with each other. They just do it. But we had kids and we had been someplace and we were out late at night in Germany, and same thing you just kind of said, except without the emergency. There was a don't walk sign, and there was not a car in sight. And we didn't walk because you don't want to push it if you're an American tourist with a bunch of kids. But the Germans, they would not walk. They waited for that light. And
Wow.
having come just from Italy, I was like, how do people develop such different national personalities? That's why I love going places, because you just learn.
The
There's so
German
much
thing
to
is
think about.
German is the explanation of kindergarten. It's the teach you to shut up, stand in line, and go to work at a
Yes,
factory.
yes.
So I've noticed the difference from when we moved to the East Coast to the West Coast that, and there was a big difference. This was in 2012. There's a big difference in Washington and Oregon people. There's a big difference between Washington, Oregon, and California people. And it depends on if you're in the valley or if you're east or west of
Huh,
that part of the state. And East Coast wise, you get to the light and it says don't walk, but there's no cars coming. I'm going. Even if it's broad daylight, I got to go. I'm going to make it
right.
across. I'm not going to run out in traffic, but I'm going to make it across. And then 2012 timeframe, they were so in line of following rules that they wouldn't go. And that was the
Huh,
East Coast, West Coast difference. And I was
huh,
like, wow, that's something. And then looking at like the beaches in Washington was there's driftwood and stuff all over the beach. And they're like, nope, you can't touch it. You can't move it. But you go to Oregon and you go, well, I'm going to have a bonfire with this driftwood. And they're like, yeah,
mhm.
do that. So I'm like, wow, how is it
That
so
is
different?
different. Yeah.
And then
It's
it does seem like from that time, you have the people from California were leaving, going up the valley in Oregon. And so we lived in Salem for a while, and Salem had a different feel than Eastern Oregon, like out in Bend and other places in the desert, that was also different from the coast. They call it the coast over there. We call it the
mhm,
beach on the east.
right.
And so you go out to the coast, and it used to be the more independent mindset, but it was turning into people from the valley. So you had
Mm,
Californians displace the valley people. The valley people go to the coast if you had the money, and
right.
then the more conservative people are out in the east. So it's interesting seeing how states divide, and then Oregon just being so much federal land, it's a
Ah,
different feel for it too. But
okay.
it's interesting seeing the people that want to follow rules and they don't. And then you look at society 10 to 15 years from then, and the people that were against the war and against the big government now seem like they're the ones that are for war and for the big government. And you're like, what's going on? What's happening?
That's
There's
that's very interesting because one of my friends from high school was she went to California. She was a hippie. She became an airline attendant. She moved to Hawaii. I mean, she just was living the cool life. And now she's a very bitter, angry, conservative person that
oh,
startled the heck out of me. It was like, what happened to my hippy dippy friend? And I don't know what happened. I don't know why. Um, that because that was such a complete reversal. I mean, I could see what tempering on either end, but wow, I don't even recognize her personality. So
I like the
it's
saying
interesting.
that a liberal is a person that is a conservative that hasn't been mugged. That's fun. It's fun to think about.
That's pretty funny.
Then you start to
Maybe
go,
that's
we
it.
need some
Maybe.
rules in here.
Well, I will say that in Hawaii, um, they aren't really, according to her, they're not as eager to embrace people from the mainland. You know,
Yeah, don't like the haoles.
they've been kind of screwed over by people from the mainland, so you can understand it. But I think she was on the other end because she had always been kind of special, and I think she was on the end of not being special, and it changed how she worked, her mind
Hmm.
well. I
Yeah,
could talk about
it is strange.
we could fix the world's problems all day long, I think. I hope somebody will listen to us and just think, and don't let people fool you. That would be very important to me.
I get the feeling that you're done, but I'd like to talk about writing for a moment if you have the
Oh,
time.
no, I'm not done.
Okay. So, writing. When you write, do you have a specific area that you write and a specific time of day? Or if it's changing, what is it right now?
I think because of the way my lifestyle was always arranged around children and work situations, I can write anywhere. I can tune people out. Um, I don't love sitting at a desk for any length of time and writing. So I'll go from, I'll be on the sofa, I might sit on upstairs in the bed, and I might sit at a desk too. A lot of people I know are not like that at all. They have to have everything set up exactly, um, you know, uh, a writing space. And to me, I'm going to write wherever there's space. And so that's what I've always done. And now I've started carrying around. Now, I guess I must have done this before and just kind of stopped. But I started carrying around a notebook so that when I am waiting at the doctor's office, that I can scribble ideas rather than scroll on my phone. That's what happened. I started getting addicted to scrolling on my phone and forgot I
Hmm.
could have a much better creative use of my time. So no, I can write just about anywhere and usually under a lot of different circumstances. Um, but it's hard because other people, when you're writing, people think you're not doing anything. So my husband is fantastic and he tries really hard, but it's still impossible for him to respect a closed door because he'll peek in and he said, "Oh, you're writing." Well, and so he said, "I'll come back later." Well, of course I'm going to say, "Just tell me what you want," because I'll be thinking, "What are you wanting?" So I think having a protected space might help. In my house, it wouldn't make any difference, but I people just have to do what they have to do.
How do you get into that mindset of writing? Like when you're like, you have the time, how do you do that?
People, and I try, if I'm being disciplined, I'll do something with my writing 5 out of 7 days. That could be I'm working on like promoting something or, but I try to have at least 5 days, well, 4 days where I get 500 words a day. And if I'm cooking, I'll go, I mean, doing real well with it, I'll go longer. But I think, I mean, most people agree you can't wait for inspiration. You just have to put your behind in the seat and write. And there's a lot of wisdom on just write. If it's not perfect, you can come back and change it later. That's what editing is. And so if I can just get in the habit of holding myself accountable. When I wrote my first couple of books, I was in a writing group. And if there's anybody out there listening who is interested in developing your writing, get in a writing group. Part one. Part two, if you get in a writing group that you realize it's not good for you, don't feel bad about getting out of that writing group. I was so lucky. I got in a writing group that has just been so helpful to me. And it helped me with accountability. It helped me with accepting criticism. Only I was kind of the opposite. If somebody would say, oh, maybe you should change this, I'd be like, well, of course I should. And I got stronger with that and like, maybe not. That's just something you develop. But get in a writing group if you want to write. And then the rest, I think, where you write and when you write, I think it'll fall in place for you.
Yeah, the writing group is a great way to develop that confidence and self-esteem balance where you can hear what other people write. You can hear the advice they get from depending on how your writing group is set up. And yeah, it's invaluable. I really like that. On the topic of waiting for inspiration to strike, I found with poetry and more so with short stories, if I get an idea for a short story, I have to write it right then or I'm never going to write it. And it's if you have the time to stop whatever you're doing and then go write 3,000 to 5,000 words, then that's what you need to go do, because it's just going to be in a list of short story ideas otherwise, in a notebook or on your notes in your phone. But with a novel or a novella or a larger book, then I think you just write those thoughts as they occur down, whether it's in the notebook, on the phone, somewhere. That's that first step, is recognizing it's something, capturing it is the second step, and then doing something with it after that is the next step. But how do you keep organized with those ideas as they occur, like the stuff you put in the notebook?
I imagine you've heard of the terms pantser and plotter.
Right.
Pantser flies by the seat of their pants. They sit down. It comes to them as it comes to them. They organize it. And I'm kind of in the middle of that. I will have a lot of the ideas. But I'll go ahead and start, because mine is almost all character driven. So a lot of times my characters will take me to places, and then I'll stop after I've got maybe 3 or 4 chapters, and then I'll go, okay, I've got my characters. I love the setup, but now I need to get some discipline. I can't just have fun with these characters for another 200 pages. I've got to decide what I want them to do, where I want them to go, how I want them to change. And so I combine that with a very loose kind of outline form, with mostly bullet points. And I've found this is really helpful for me. I include on that the last sentence of the chapter. So I'll have chapter 1, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens. And after I write the chapter, I put the last sentence there. So if I'm distracted and I don't get to come back, that last sentence will help me redirect, and it'll also help me keep the mood that I had. And last sentences in chapters are cool. I think they need to make the reader go, oh, I was going to go to sleep, but now I have to read the next chapter. So, and Stephen King is like a genius at that. Don't start his book at night because you won't get any sleep. So those are the kinds of things that help me. And at some point, like maybe I'll be a third of the way through, and I can go ahead and just slap down bullet points for what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. But if I didn't do that, I'd waste so much time going back and thinking, like, did I develop that? Or, because even if you write things relatively quickly in a compressed time space, you can't remember every little detail. And here's a pointer that I don't do, that I hope I will do sometime. A lot of people keep spreadsheets, and they keep spreadsheets of their character traits. So if you have a character who has these amazing green eyes in the first chapter, and that they don't show back up till the middle of the book, and you forget and you give them blue eyes, if you've got that on your spreadsheet, that won't happen. I have got to start doing that. I'm pretty good about mixing in with my outline, I might put a little snippet from the actual book to say a description of somebody. So I might have it right there. And of course, you can always refer to it. But the problem is you don't know you need to refer to it because you think she's got blue eyes now. So it's, I think you have to develop just the way you develop your voice and style. You have to develop your own technique. I know people who do a timeline, they'll do visuals, they'll have it all over their office, and it works great for them. I don't think I could do that. I haven't tried it, but I don't think I can do that kind of linear. For me, it's more of it in depth rather than that. So yeah, when I talk to people who are interested in how I write, I say, I'm just going to tell you about me. That doesn't mean you want to do that, because if that's going to drive you crazy, don't do it. So a combination of all of those, whatever you want, whatever works, but it's about sitting down and doing it. And
Yeah, you have to put the time in. I often have reluctance, or had reluctance, to trying those different techniques when I hear it from other people and go, I don't think that would work for me. And then I've gotten to the point now where I'll try them and see
yeah,
how it
yeah,
works. And you usually learn a little something, and it might not be something that you use all the time, but it, as Stephen King would say in On Writing,
yeah.
it's that other tool in your toolbox, to where if you get stuck somewhere, you don't know, the scene doesn't seem just right, then maybe you can do one of these other little things and it'll change it around for you. So
And,
some stories I do timelines, some I don't. Some I have like reference lists of characters and past things they've said, or lines that
oh,
I want
that's
to put
good.
in,
Something
and
they've
then you put
said.
them
I
in
like that.
eventually.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
it it does get to the point where I feel like in book link things that you dread going back and connecting all those dots after the first draft, and you go, oh, this is going to be so much work now, maybe I need to write a little more. And that makes me want to keep writing forward in the book instead of stopping halfway through, because I don't want to go back and correct all the things yet. If I don't know, because you think, where does the story go? You get to the end and then go back, maybe let it sit for a little while, or then you become excited about it because something else happens and you go, well, I don't really want to do that. So I'll do this other thing that I was kind of dreading, but I dread it less than this thing. So
and that's the
keep it going.
recommendation. The recommendation is to get that first draft there. And I would say I pretty much do that, but I will go back to a previous chapter and I might clean it up. I might just read it, but it just helps me get in the mindset of the character. And a friend of mine is a runner, and she gets scenes, whole scenes in her head while she's running. And will,
Mm.
as soon as she gets home, she'll jot down the scene. This is what's happened. And then it's a matter of connecting the scenes, which I do a little bit of that with the way I structure the chapter. But that that would do well on a timeline too.
When I'm writing, I run a lot more,
Yeah.
because it's the time where that part of your mind kind of separates and starts thinking about it on its own. And also write a lot when you're in that mode between sleep and awake. And the way you get there is by physical exhaustion through running, working out, or
Right.
doing some other yard work or something. And then when you lay down, your mind is like, well, I'm going to see what's going on with this story. That's exciting. And then music, I think, adds that layer to it. Like when I'm running, I listen to music,
Oh yeah.
and
Okay.
then you start to make your own unofficial soundtrack of whatever story you're writing. And oftentimes my chapters will be songs, because just in the draft form, it'll be the song title, because that's the song I listen to. And I think about that chapter, and I think about that one. I
That
think
would
about
be
that.
that would be really cool if you ever do an audio book, because you could actually have a playlist that goes
Mm.
along with your audiobook, or just a playlist. But yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. The book that I have that's coming out in November is a little, it's not darker, but it's not quite as like the mystery series that I work on is, there's danger and it's not, to me it's like a beach read with some substance. It's a beach read that you won't forget when you leave the beach. But the one that's coming out in November is a little bit more, I guess, introspective. But I have one of the main characters' mother was really into horoscopes, and not and kind of to the detriment of their relationship and a lot of other things. So when I wrote that, I'd never had titled my chapters before, but I got all of these different horoscopes, and I would read all these horoscopes and got the language down in the horoscope and kind of weave in those horoscopes and then pull a phrase from the horoscope that would be a title of the chapter. And that was so much fun. And it also really helped me stay grounded with it, because it was like past becomes present was one of the chapter titles. And I'm like, okay, yeah, in this one, I've got to make that connection, or I've got to at least remember that connection. And it really was strangely helpful. I'm not a horoscope. I mean, I love to read my horoscope, but I read the other day that the 10 worst horoscopes, list of the 10 worst zodiac signs. And I'm a Cancer, and I was the worst zodiac sign. And I'm like, well, who asked you anyway? But I just thought it's so funny. I mean, my mother was big at blaming any kind of fault she might have. The fault did lie in the stars for her, not in herself. Horatio says, or not Horatio. It's one of the Cassius. That was the Julius Caesar one. But anyway, I kind of got some of the ideas from that. But a lot of people title their chapters. That's not something I pay that much attention to when I read, although it's kind of fun because it kind of gives you a heads up for things. But I don't know. I'm not doing it now with what I'm working on now. I don't know if I'll do it again, but it definitely worked well with that and helped
Yeah, I
me.
usually do just numbers, but to
Yeah, me
me,
too.
the
Me
chapter has
too.
a title.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's not. And I work. Some of the people in my writing group definitely did chapter names, and they were provocative. And in some ways, you're like, okay, I really want to read this. So to me, that would be the reason to do them. If you don't need that, or it's just not working, you don't need them. But
In
it,
in script writing, I find that the title is more well received because people want a script is different than reading a
yeah,
book. You are privy to so much more reading a script than you would be to reading a book
right.
because you know things that happen quicker, and you
Yeah,
know people when you shouldn't know them. You just know behind the scene things because you're reading an instruction manual to a story and not the story. But
yeah. So you are writing just a little bit of everything.
script writing is what I've started within the past half a year or year or so. And it's, I used to think, why do you need to make a script for a book? You have the book, just make a movie out of that. And then I learned that it's a separate
Right.
language, and
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's suggestions and instructions to the director and the actors. And all of those things are going to matter. It's much more collaborative. And it happened for me from writing books by myself to doing some collaborative books to then doing script writing. And I think it makes book writing, my book writing better, having practiced scripts. And yeah, it's one of those things where do the exercise and see what you think of it, because it's just it's fun. So this
And
writing books are
you're
still
gonna
fun, but
you're gonna strip away um, the extra stuff when you if you are if you learn how to write a script. I think your writing other forms are just going to be tighter, because
yep.
in a script it has to be tighter. I can't tell you everything that my character is thinking. Uh,
I
I
was
can just
never
tell you how
super
to show it.
descriptive, wasn't super descriptive in books, especially when it comes to characters. I would a little bit of description of them, but not much, because I wanted the reader to be able to picture them however they wanted to. And usually from people that read them and I ask them, what do you think that person looks like? I get much different things.
Yeah,
But
that's interesting.
in script writing, I have a vision for what the person looks like, but I maybe describe it a little bit more, but certainly the scene is set up in a much different way in a line or two, and even the title of the scene versus pages in a book of describing
right.
a scene. So
Yeah,
it's
and I'm not huge on descriptions of settings. That can be very literary fiction to me. And if you don't do it well, it's boring. And I like to blend it in, like instead of saying the mountains and majestic and blah, 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 I might have her look up at the mountains and they make her feel claustrophobic. So I'm telling you something about
nice.
her and the mountains at the same time because, I am not the best probably at describing majestic mountains, or I'm as good as anybody. It depends on how you look at it. But
That's
yeah.
why I think it's important to go to writing groups and also read
Oh, yeah.
other writers, is because you could be mystified and people are like, Hemingway, such a great writer, such a great writer. And then you read it and you go, this is
Who's
Movable
talking?
Feast
Yeah.
is just about a writer hanging around Paris,
Yep.
going to visit other writers. And
He
you
would
go,
never get
okay.
published. He would never get published today. Poor old
Like
Hemingway.
back then, it was probably descriptive enough to where people were like, oh, I'm traveling to Paris through Hemingway. So
And
it's,
he
but
does
now,
those conversation. He almost has no dialogue tags. And
yeah, I like that.
and but the bad thing about it is sometimes all his characters sound the same. And you got to give something. You don't have to say Kathy said or that said, but you could um, say it and then say she hung up the clothes after. Just
Yep.
help people, help your reader.
Every now and then put a
Yeah,
little
just help
dialogue
them.
tag in there.
Don't
I mean,
confuse them and frustrate them. So
people say those dialogue tags are supposed to disappear, but when they start popping out, it's hard to avoid seeing them. It's like somebody talking and saying and
yeah,
you
yeah,
become just counting the uhs and ums instead of listening to what they're saying. And with script writing, that's another thing that got me into that, was trying to find a way to do dialogue tags differently. So
hmm
originally I was
hmm
looking at plays and going, well, can I just write a novel like a play is written and just write, Metellus, Caesar, and then here's their
right,
lines
right,
versus he said, she said, all that. And then in script writing, it's just center of the page, the person's name in all caps, maybe bolded if you want, and then what they say. And
right.
you don't have to say how they say it. That's up to the actor. And
Yeah,
hopefully, if you've written the scene well, they'll understand how they're supposed to say it. Or maybe it'll be a pleasant surprise if they do it a different way and you go, wow,
right.
I didn't see that. But yeah, it's exciting.
I mean, writing is just this is another kind of interesting thing. I've done a couple of, well, several workshops, and one I did with a I was like part of the workshop. I wasn't leading the whole thing, and my books were fiction, and the topic was memoir writing. And so one of the older men, I tell you, I've done some senior citizen places, and they're nice, but they probably are not going to buy your book, and they can be cranky. So this guy was like, and your books look good, but I came here to learn how to write memoir, and this looks like fiction. And so the guy I was doing it with, he was kind of a little offended for me. I said, oh no. I said, I'm going to tell you something I want you to start thinking about. I don't write memoirs, but I bet you I reveal more about myself through my characters and through my fiction than you would ever learn from a memoir that I wrote, because I'm going to censor myself in the memoir consciously. And my characters are going to speak occasionally with me, not my voice, but my character. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're paying attention to that, I bet you'll know more about me than if I put it in a memoir. And he was like, it satisfied him. He was still cranky, but it's like you can't please everyone. But I started thinking about that and how true that is. That you often, I mean, a friend of mine, has written a sci-fi romance, and you would think, well, that is just it's just out there. I'm not a huge sci-fi or a huge romance, but I really like what she does. And part of the reason that I like what she does is she's revealing things about the author through things that happen, and her character's coming through. It's nice when you know the writer and that happens, but you can do it with anybody. I mean, any author. You're like, okay, if I met this woman or this man, here's some questions. I bet if I asked them, I could predict their answers from what their characters did. So it's cool. There's just so many things. I don't have anything. I don't think I have enough to do a memoir. Um, but I have included so many things from my real life in my books that I probably have written one. You just have to pull it out.
Yeah. Hmm. Speaking of memoirs, how did you get into podcasting then?
Oh, it was fun because in our writing group, there were more men than women. And that's good and bad. What is it, like 70 or 75% of the book buyers are women? It might even be higher. And my audience, although the men in the group were not bored with my writing, they weren't my specific audience. So a lot of times they would make comments that, I would just jot something down, but I knew I wasn't going to follow that comment. The difference is, one of the guys in the group at the time was an expert on arms, weapons and munitions. I don't know why, but all I
Why
wanted to
not?
know, I mean, I'm not a gun person, so but my character has to fire one. And I wanted to know if this particular thing I had her do, if she could do that with in ignorance, that if this could
Hmm.
happen. And he told me, well, instead of just saying, "Oh yeah, that could happen," just to make sure you don't do this or what or whatever. Oh my God, he gave me a rundown on all kinds of ammunition and the type of gun. I said, I just need a gun that will do this because she knows nothing about guns. She doesn't have to tell that. So, but that was the kind of interesting things, different kind of details that men kind of centered on. And of course, that was part of his background too. So, in the group of women, we came up with the title Wild Women Who Write. And we started a web page and we started doing some outreach and a little bit of workshops. And then it was like, hey, my dad's got a barn. Let's do a podcast. Because I had never been a big avid listener to podcasts at the time. I mean, I felt like I had so many distractions. I did not need another excuse not to write.
Hmm.
But I realized you can do a podcast. It doesn't have to be a celebrity podcast. So we started a podcast and we interviewed primarily local authors, and several of those local authors now have books published. And one, there's a Netflix, I think it's in production. It's called Gothic Town. And she was on our little local podcast. And another, Kimberly Bell, is like an international known author who happened to live close and was just very generous with her time. And I think we did about 30 something episodes, but we haven't been doing it lately. And mainly because we all are once you start having a body of work out there, you want people to read it. And I don't know about you, but I'm guessing most authors promoting their work that's the last thing I want to do. I want to write it. I want to talk about it. I want people to read it. But as far as promoting it, it's kind of hard for me, and that's true of a lot of authors. So we realized we needed that our podcast needed to center more on what we were doing and not just interviewing other people. But then that was so hard for us. We just haven't gotten back to doing it. I think we will. And
Hmm.
I think I don't want to do it by myself, but I think I might have some fun doing some of little snippets by myself. But yeah, that was a totally different experience. And it was like the two main women, there were mainly three of us. We had a few others coming in and out, but they were like, well, I don't know anything about a podcast. I said, well, that's what we're going to learn. We're going to learn about podcasts. And we did, and it was so much fun. And I think it added a dimension to our understanding of the whole business of writing, if that makes sense. I mean, we didn't
Hmm.
monetize or anything, but the idea that you're talking to other people who are writers and you're thinking of ways to help them, and that helps you think of ways to help yourself. So it was a really cool developmental thing.
Yeah, it's for me, it's like a writing group.
Hmm.
So you're talking like half the fun, most of the fun, 90% of the fun of the writing group for me was meeting strange people because
Yeah.
writing groups have strange people.
Okay. Yes.
So it was the seeing the work, talking a little bit about it. I mean, I don't want to sit in there and listen to 20 pages from somebody, but if we talk about writing and I'm interested in it, I'll read your whole book and tell you what I think about it.
Hmm.
And it's so it's more of developing those relationships and talking about writing. So that's
Yeah.
why I started doing the podcasting, was because it's like a writing group, because I stopped going
Yeah.
to this other writing group or moved farther away from where it was. So that's the fun for me. And then
And
learning those other little things that writers do and going, oh man, I can try that. I try
yes,
that way of doing it. Then that's pretty great.
I think I said I started doing a little bit of the TikTok again, and what am I calling? Oh, I'm calling it Katherine Nichols, bedtime stories by Katherine Nichols, and I'm just pulling some little snippets from my book, and then I decided I'm going to throw in a writing tip just in case somebody is an aspiring author. So, and it's so funny how many little ones there are. Like in my false claims, the mystery one, I have a character named Lucy and Lance, and they're a couple. Well, it's not a good idea to have the characters with that where their names begin with the same letter. That can be confusing to some readers. So, and for some odd reason, I get a C name in my head, and everybody is a C name,
Hmm.
and like it's just a weird thing. But for Lucy and Lance, they had to be because she was her whole thing was, how can such an alliterative combination ever go wrong? And of course, it goes wrong right away. But
Hmm.
so unless you have a really good reason, a tip is give all your characters, have them start with different initials. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to go back and change that. I'll get stuck on an N name or an N, all the names in the world that start with an N. And I'm like, how did I do that? And so just a little tip like that. That and I like ending not with an annoying cliffhanger, but something at the end of your chapter that is like, oh, okay. And it might hint at something, it might, do anything. So I like to combine those kinds of little kind of silly tips that still are helpful for your readers with, something that might be more substantive.
Yeah,
So
I like that
it's fun.
classification of annoying cliffhanger. That's
Yes, you
that's a
have to
good
be
way to
really,
describe it.
yes,
You
you
want
have
a
to be
teaser somewhere
right.
between teaser and annoying cliffhanger.
Yeah, you just want to me it's you want to end with something that makes you go, "Oh, wait a minute. What?" And I look at it again. Now, it could be you can have some that are a little more dramatic, and you realize, "Uh-oh, a little foreshadowing,
Hmm.
something
Hmm.
going on." But it also helps the writer, I think, because you kind of wrap it up a little bit, and it helps you gauge if you're going in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, peaks and valleys, and moderation and everything, even moderation. I like that.
Right. So, well,
I,
are
I
you
spoke I spoke to a painter one time on a podcast that talked about they were a classically trained painter, and I can't remember the type of schooling that's called, but she was explaining how you learn all these different techniques, and that's the importance of going to school to learn painting,
right?
because these are techniques that have been learned over hundreds of years from different painters, and like they've discovered them or realized them or whatever. And I think that's like that in writing too, where you would go, well, wow, I've discovered this new thing, but no, it's always been around, you just didn't know it. And
Yeah,
maybe it helps if you have somebody that's saying, here's a thing that makes writing easier, or here's a thing to try. And it's again one of those other tools for the toolbox.
yeah. Uh, if you're interested in AI, there's a show, I think it's on Netflix. It's called Murderbot. It's the cool scars guard, Eric. Anyway, the tall, good-looking Norse actor, and
Oh, okay. Sarsgaard.
he is yeah. Thank you.
Sorry.
He is a robot or an AI, and it's a very cool premise because he's assigned to be guard. I mean, he's very important assignment, sort of. All he really wants to do is watch science fiction on TV. That's all he wants to do. And so he's forced into interacting with people and whatever. But it's a really cool take on that because I was thinking when you were, it's the painting and there's nothing totally original. And I'm wondering if AI is going to open other avenues for that, or if it'll just boil down to the same thing where, yes, it's artificial intelligence, but there's the same problems, the same issues, and the
I
same
feel like
costs.
it's going to reach, like, it's the visualizing picture when you said that, which is they're just going to reach the end of that human experience that we might not have reached yet. With the AI, just it can hold things in a singular mind more than a human can, and then it can expand out of that. So it'll have realizations that a culture would realize, but much quicker because it's just taking all that and compiling it quicker. So that's interesting to check that out.
I don't know if you can hear it, but we're starting to get one of those unpleasant storms.
Yeah, we've had those the past few days here.
Yeah,
We're in
rumbling.
Florida, so we're a
Yeah.
little bit south of you.
Oh yeah, Florida. Oof, scary.
All right, so a lot of good information, good talk. Maybe
Great.
talk again in the future sometime.
I hope
What
so.
is the best way for people to follow your work and see what you're doing?
All my books are on Amazon. It's Katherine Nichols. There are two Katherine Nichols, but one of them is much younger and actually better looking than I am. So if you're looking for me, you look for the one who has books, The Sometimes Sister, The Substitute Sister, and I have more books than she does, so I think you'll find me easily. But if you Google Katherine Nichols, Katherine Nichols, and any of the titles of my book. So if you did False Claims, or if you did The Unreliables, you would find me. You find me easily on Amazon, and that's probably the best place. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, but and of course, if you find me on Facebook, it's Kathy Stagner, Stagner Nichols, and I'm happy to add you to my list. I do post a lot of things there. I do have a website, but I've got to revamp it. I'm not good at the website thing. I need some of my former students to come help me. But I'd say the best place to get information about me as well as my books would be Amazon. And you can order them through local bookstores. So you don't have to buy on Amazon. I'm registered in such a way that the bookstore will order it for you if you prefer to support local bookstores, which I think is a very important thing.
Okay. Those links will be in the show notes for anybody that's interested in them. And I think I have links for each of your books that are on Amazon too. So
perfect.
People can check those out. Any thoughts in closing or anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't?
No, I'm just really appreciate the opportunity. There aren't a lot of people that want to talk to you at length about the writing process. So it's always fun to find someone who enjoys it, that you're not just captured them in the corner at the party and they're going, oh no, it's her, and they can't get away fast enough. But if you're an aspiring writer, I think being in the company of other writers is so important. And don't feel like insecure with those people, just surround yourself with people who understand your sadness and joy in writing.
Agreed. I'll talk to you on the other side of this musical exit.